Quick side note before we begin the video. If you're unaware, I am unemployed currently, and my government financial aid has run out. I've got some money saved up, and I'm going to stay with a family member for housing, but my financial future is a little bit uncertain. The best I can do right now is start a Patreon with rewards like early access to videos and exclusive book reviews with more rewards planned in the future. More details at the end of the video. Have you ever avoided a story for the longest time, despite being on some level aware that it exists? It has a fan base that refuses to shut up about it, and then you give it a chance and you come to absolutely adore it? Well, that's my story with One Piece. I'd heard of One Piece years ago in several YouTube videos as one of the quote-unquote Big Three shonen battle manga by authors who were inspired by the works of Akira Toriyama, chiefly Dragon Ball. I knew it was about pirates, I knew it was focused on this rubber guy named Monkey D. Luffy, and I knew there were magic-cursed fruit powers. I had also seen the death battles with Zoro and Ace, so I knew a bit about the later storylines, but none of it seemed too enticing. Until I saw this video by His Holiness the Anime Pope, and this video by Mr. Morge, which exposed me to more of the series' characters, conflicts, and of course, the world. The more I watched, the more I realized that this story was right up my alley. And I started it, with the manga specifically, after I watched a bit of the anime to get invested. I wasn't really a manga reader at the time, but I knew about the Shonen Jump app, and I watched the first 50 episodes of the anime, so I got a taste of what the story was actually like. And when I was deep enough into Arlong Park, I knew this was a story I was going to follow for the long haul. A few years later, it's my second favorite manga, behind only My Hero Academia, which I talked about last time, and it may not be my absolute favorite right now, it's not finished, and Monkey D. Luffy, much like the man who created him, is never one to back down from a challenge. In recent memory, I've also seen a number of other people jump on the hype train, and the story is always the same. The fans were right, this story is amazing, incredible even. Some even called it life-changing. Even skeptics put off by the art style, or the length of the manga eventually come around. But that begs the question, how? How does this crazy-looking, crazy-long comic win over so many people? Well, there is an answer to that, though it is a bit of a long one. But we've got to start somewhere. Before I explain the story, I'm going to explain the various adaptations. The first major adaptation, and the one you've probably seen the most about, is the original anime. This is the one with over 1,000 episodes, a whole bunch of side movies, and the most merchandise. The thing with 22-minute anime episodes is that they cover roughly 2 manga chapters each. You may note that despite how long it is, the manga is not even close to 2,000 chapters. And that's where all the filler and time bending comes from. Fans have made jokes, videos, and even re-edits in an attempt to fix it, make it run at a reasonable pace. If any of you are familiar with that 5 minutes being stretched into 2 hours, this is that, but on a much larger scale. And indeed, there are official better options as well, like the N episode of Reanimations, and the upcoming The One Piece, an entirely new adaptation planned to be from the beginning to the end of the story with better pacing. Last of the major adaptations is the live-action adaptation on Netflix, which, contrary to what we were all thinking prior to its release, actually broke the live-action anime curse, and contrary to my expectations, it was actually pretty awesome. There were changes made from the original story and compromises made as a result of the different medium, but for adapting a story that's so unapologetically cartoony, they did well, stretching whatever they could get away with, and not making something hyper-realistic just because. Disney! So, looking at all of them, I personally don't recommend the original anime, as I'm not wasting my time on awful pacing. But there are people, including some that I know, that do love it, and it's how they prefer to experience the story. And that's all well and good for them, but I'm guessing that's probably not what most people are looking for. If you're new to anime, or you don't want to wait for The One Piece and you don't want to read the manga, I might recommend the live-action adaptation. But personally, my preferred way to experience the story has always been the manga, occasionally stepping into an anime side project like One Piece Fan Letter. With the manga, I can burn through it reasonably fast, and I get to enjoy the story as authentically as the author intended. Whichever one you choose, all of them were crafted with a love of this story and all of them capture the spirit of it. You can't really go wrong with any of them. So with that starting point established, we are on the cruise! One Piece begins with this kid, Monkey D. Luffy, who is determined to be the next king of the pirates. He heard so many tales of heroic pirates that always lived life as free as possible, gathered loyal crews that would follow them anywhere, and ventured forth into the most dangerous places in the world. Most notable of them was Gol D. Roger, king of the pirates, who obtained everything the world has to offer and left it in one piece on an island at the end of the Grand Line. And on the day of his execution, he told the world if they could find his treasure, they could have it. And then they could be king of the pirates. So Luffy vowed he would live the life of a pirate one day. He would put together a crew of the most capable people in the Four Seas and the Grand Line, and he would find the One Piece, and become king of the pirates. Fast forward a few years, and Luffy sets out. And after some missteps, he bumbles his way through the East Blue and puts together a crew of 5 of the best people the sea has to offer. Each with an absolutely tear-jerking backstory revealed in impactful fashion, each with a dream as lofty as Luffy's, but all of them believe in him as their captain, unflinchingly and uncompromising. Roronoa Zoro, who aims to become the greatest swordsman in the world. Nami, formerly a thief, who stole in an attempt to free her family and friends, but now a navigator who aims to map all the world's oceans. Usopp, a sharpshooter who wants to be a brave warrior of the sea just like his father. And finally, Sanji, a pirate cook who wants to find a sea known as the All Blue, which all of the wildlife in the world resides in. A place where a cook could craft any dish imaginable. Together, they form the Straw Hat Pirates. With the crew assembled, Luffy and his friends set off for the Grand Line, an ocean that encompasses the entire world, full of sea monsters, entire islands, civilizations both young and old, and of course, pirates, all vying for the same thing, the One Piece. There are more Straw Hats and even many more who follow in their wake, but I'll leave them for you to discover on your own. So let's move on to the story. Like many shonen manga, One Piece is separated into arcs, but then those arcs often connect into larger sagas. Each saga is around 50 to 100 chapters and usually has a single primary villain, whose influence extends over the whole thing. Each island visited is wildly creative and possesses its own world and societal structure, yet simultaneously feels grounded within the wider world and the story. From an island that's constantly sinking and is full of canals and their own transport system, to an island on the back of a giant elephant, populated by furries. The story of each one is a bit formulaic though. They start with the Straw Hats making it to the island. Things are fine for a while as they take in the unique features of the setting, then some evil force will get wind of their presence, and after 50 plus chapters of running around and evading capture, Luffy beats the bad guy. Then with things set right, they head off to the next adventure. But Oda-sensei manages to keep the formula fresh. Not only is each island extremely different from the next, later in the story there are several wrinkles added that make the story a lot more unpredictable. The further you go, the more wrinkles get added. Ongoing mysteries slowly unfold, entire islands are foreshadowed literally decades in advance, and more time is taken away from the Straw Hats to focus on the ever-changing state of the world, both due to their actions and the actions of others, both from those who would support them or oppose them. Which brings me to my next point. One of the most common points of praise One Piece tends to get, which happens to be the thing that drew me into the series, is the fantastic world building. It's not obvious in the beginning. In East Blue, everything looks mostly typical for a pirate world. Aside from the occasional pirate or marine with a moderately powerful devil fruit, or someone from the Grand Line who wanders out for a second like Mihawk, nothing is too crazy. But once we get to the Grand Line, things start getting a bit more fantastical. Instead of the occasional pirate captain or high-ranking marine with a devil fruit, we have entire pirate crews or marine squads all with devil fruit powers. Instead of big pirate ships with weird designs or an island with a big building on it, we have islands with drum-shaped mountains, or islands of desert populated by large ducks, or islands of the sky made of clouds populated by angel people, with seas made of less dense clouds. And that's just the first couple hundred chapters. It only gets crazier from there. The laws of nature don't apply the same way in the Grand Line, But there is a method to the madness. Let's take those sky islands I mentioned before, for example. They have construction based on excavating the more dense clouds that can be built with. The Skypians also have their own society, with a system of government and a police force, and a system of technology based around absorbent shellfish called dials that affects everything from transportation to entertainment. And all of that is without mentioning Skypia's role in the greater story, which I won't spoil here. I will say, though, that it's quite the paradigm shift. Each island the Straw Hats visit is its own world, as fleshed out as the primary locations in any other manga. Even other manga greats like those we've covered before. And that's just the baseline of world building. For the first half of the Grand Line even, things get another order of magnitude weird and wild in the second half. And as the world expands, we see more and more of its politics. Don't worry, it's not boring or infuriating, but it is realistically messed up. All the Marines answer to the world government, a massive authoritarian regime with a suspiciously missing chapter of history right before its creation. A number of smaller nations have come under their rule as long as they abide by the government's laws, and they vary greatly in terms of quality of life. Naturally, some very successful pirate crews have expanded to entire nations with fleets of ships and governmental and military structures in their own right, and that is only on a zoomed out level. There are still smaller structures of commerce, communication, and of course rebellion. And all of these structures are shifting constantly, both due to decisions made by those in power, but also due to Luffy punching out another big bad. A revolution is happening, and many mysteries are coming to light. Mysteries about the founding of the government, and about the world as a whole. And the Straw Hats and Luffy's quest to find the One Piece is at the center of it. This is the other side of the world building that grows with time, and as the story goes on, we spend more and more time away from the Straw Hats and looking at the wider world. Sometimes we even spend entire mini-arcs with no Luffy and friends, and we get to see what potential future antagonists are doing. We may even get a preview of a major villain of a saga. And the shifting state of the world affects characters at the micro level as well. The loss of a high-ranking pirate who previously protected an island means the island needs to find a new protector, and they'll make whatever compromises they need to in order to get it. The world is established piece by piece, so the One Piece world we have today is truly massive and deep, and it's all building towards one incredible final destination. Speaking of which, this is just a minor point, but I felt it had to be addressed because it's one of the most common criticisms I've seen people from the outside make, and it's demonstrably false. The idea that the story is just going and going with absolutely no end in sight and no end planned. I can understand why one would come to that conclusion if they just looked at it having never read more than a few chapters, or watched a few episodes of the anime, or even none of either. Or if you weren't paying attention to the reveal of the ongoing mystery. Because, if you actually take the time to engage with the story and pay attention to the Straw Hats' progress through the world, eventually answers to many of the questions throughout the series come into view, including culprits behind the state of the world. So, with a minor spoiler warning, I'll tell you what I can to make my case without giving away too much. First and foremost is crossing the red line. About 500 chapters in, the Straw Hats reach the halfway point in their journey. We know it's the halfway point because it encompasses the world just as much as the Grand Line, just 90 degrees different. No author who intends to just go on forever does something like that. Second, the power ceiling. Not of the Straw Hats themselves, but of the villains. From the strongest pirate warlords to the highest-ranking government officials, while some were introduced later, the structure has never changed once established in the story, and the Straw Hats have climbed it arc by arc, before recently revealing the one at the top of it all. And that's as far as I'll go there. Lastly, there's the Poneglyphs. Throughout the One Piece world, there are these giant stone blocks with information about the founding of the world government, and a suspiciously unknown portion of history known as the Void Century. Oh, and they also may point to the location of the One Piece itself. And indeed, it has been stated by one of the Straw Hats that with enough of them, a limited number more in fact, the Straw Hats will know the location of the island where the One Piece is. That still leaves many villains to defeat and many mysteries to unfold before we get there, but there is a planned definitive endpoint for the series. That, like the rest of the greater vision for the story, becomes clearer and clearer as the story progresses. With loose ends tied up, there is only one thing left to talk about for this video. How did this silly cartoon pirate story change my life? A few years ago, I was nearing the end of college. The Mythos Archives was only an idea at the time, and it would be several months before I got the chance to bring it to life. The culture war was in full swing, and I was a bit scared to comment on it. Both sides were furious, and in my eyes, they were both making a huge mistake. Each debate was super heated and super polarized, and I desperately wanted to say something, offer some nuance to the discussion. But I was afraid. I was afraid of how I'd be perceived, even after I discovered I was asexual and non-binary. I was afraid of being labeled as a woke SJW by one side and labeled as a bigot by the other if I dared utter the slightest contradiction to the general consensus. I had been reading One Piece for a few months at that point, and I was making my way through an arc about halfway through the chapters that were out at the time. And the whole time I had an uneasy feeling. There was this big battle, and it was great, but I had a feeling that tragedy was about to strike. And of course, it did. Luffy failed spectacularly, all alone, without his crew nearby, and he's thrown into despair, which is the opposite of how he usually is. Luffy was frustrated and sad like I'd never seen him before, and he breaks down in tears. But one of his friends is there to comfort him. Instead of mourning for what he lost, he should remind himself of what he still has and what he can protect. And for Luffy, that means his crew and his dream. So he starts a path to recovery, and eventually he rebuilds himself and his crew from the ground up, back on track to becoming king of the pirates. Amidst all this, I thought of Luffy and how he and his friends would deal with such a major setback, but I also thought of the villains and how they were shaping the world, many believing they were doing the right thing, even with blatantly unethical actions that hurt people very badly, labeling anyone who opposed the oppressive exploitative system as evil, a criminal, a pirate. Granted, some pirates in this world do fit that description, but not all of them. The Straw Hats certainly don't. But there are some ordinary people who see pirates as villains, thieves who take from people like them to serve their own interests. Even Nami used to see pirates in a negative light because of some bad pirates in her life. But that didn't stop Luffy, and it didn't stop the other Straw Hats. They stood by their conviction, and they even managed to win over a few who initially feared them once they saw what the plucky pirate crew is actually like. They were living freely, completely unaffected by the judgment of others. When they need to fight, they do. And quite a lot of the time, they succeed. This made me realize something very, very important. That I couldn't let the potential judgment from others, even others supposedly on the same side as me, sway me from what I believe in. Because those who actually listened to what I had to say would see the truth. Beyond even just the culture war, this shift in attitude has helped me in so many other areas of life. Instead of letting cultural norms or the judgment of others decide what I do and what I say, I'm making my own path. And it's made me feel free. If you've enjoyed any of my videos, especially these, you have One Piece to thank for their existence. And no matter what happens, I'll never stop forging my own path. Like my other favorite stories I've talked about on this channel, One Piece has elicited many feelings from me. But most of all, it has made me cry. It's not often a story makes me cry. I'm not an easy person to crack. But One Piece is better at it than any other piece of fiction I've come across. I wasn't joking when I said the backstories of the characters were tear-jerking. Some of them even made me bawl, even when I go back to watch them in the anime many times over. But even beyond that, when I finished the Wano Country arc, the arc that was in progress when I decided to read it and finished sometime after I caught up, I cried again. But it was different than the other times I had cried while reading the series. I cried happy. Something even rarer than getting me to cry of sorrow. I had invested so much of my life into this story, and I saw what it had become, and what it was still becoming. Things in the world can change for the better. If you stand by your conviction enough, if you have support from the right people, things can change. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've been watching this long, you probably liked the video. And if you're not aware, I lost my job several months ago, and I've been unable to get another one since then at the time of writing this. Also, my government financial aid has run out. Don't worry, a family member has agreed to take care of my housing and other needs, and I've got some money saved up for things like my HRT, for now at least. But I do need another source of income eventually, and the industry I work in isn't hiring people like me at the very moment. Even with the fail-safes I have in place, my financial future is a little bit uncertain. Also, full disclosure, I do plan on getting gender confirmation surgery at some point. By the way, if you're new here, I'm trans, non-binary, not sure if that was obvious. So I'm trying to get my channel monetized, and while I am approaching 1,000 subscribers, I need a lot more watch time to actually qualify for any form of monetization. So I'm going to be actively putting out videos more often in the coming weeks, and I have another of those near hour-long videos in the next few months for you all. But most importantly, I'm also starting a Patreon where I'm offering various rewards, ranging from early access to all videos, access to my AMA, exclusive content where I make audio reviews of books, comics, and anime that I don't think the algorithm would like, etc. My hope is that one day I can make this my job, but I don't know what that's going to take. I don't know if I'll ever be given that opportunity, but I also don't know if my degree and experience will get me another air quotes real job anytime soon. In any case, it's worth a shot. And if I don't get there, at least I can earn a bit of money this way, doing something that I love, and maybe spread a bit of joy and hope to all of you, especially during these dark times. If you like my videos and you want to help but don't have any spare income for my Patreon, you can always just watch my videos through to the end and remember to rate, comment, share, and subscribe. All the usual things YouTubers tell you to do. If you have a social media presence on any platform, I'd appreciate a shout out. And if you're a YouTuber or podcaster who talks about similar topics to me, I might consider collabing with you. Regardless, I appreciate whatever support you can offer. I am Kylan Mythos, signing off.